Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for our 30 on Thursday SharePoint webinar series presented by Protiviti, where we will be talking about optimizing SharePoint 2013 search relevance. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are going into our third year now of our 30 on Thursday webinar series. It is a bi-weekly 30-minute SharePoint webinar series where we talk about all things Microsoft SharePoint. Our next webinar will be on September 4th, where we will be talking about moving beyond InfoPath, forms, and workflow for SharePoint. You can see our full schedule on our website, sharepoint.protiviti.com/webinars. We have a bunch of online classes coming up. We have 3 different topics that we're focusing on in September and October: BI, styling and branding, and admin and architecture. If you're interested in any of these topics, I encourage you all to go to our training site on our website. You can see our full schedule through the end of the year and sign up for any of these free courses. We also have our annual SharePoint conference coming up in Dallas on October 20th. We are offering 50% off right now until August 29th. We have tons of sessions on BI, Nintex, responsive design. We have separate tracks for business users, technical users, and UX professionals. So check out our website, sharepointconference.org, and remember to put in the promo code to get 50% off. So for today's session, it is being recorded. We will be posting the recording by the end of today on our website, which is sharepoint.protiviti.com/archived-webinars. We do encourage you to ask questions during the presentation. Please insert them in the question window in your toolbar, and we will get to all of them after the presentation. So today's topic is optimizing SharePoint 2013 search relevance. Our presenter today is Liam Cleary, SharePoint MVP. I am Julia Oates, and I will be moderating today's session. So let's get started. I'm going to make Liam presenter, and he can take it from there.
Okay. Can everybody, excuse me, can everybody see that slide?
Yep.
Okay. Well, let's begin. So our session today, we're going to talk about search challenges. We'll talk about SharePoint 2013 search as a whole, just some basic information. Then we'll start to break down and look at the options we've got for result sources, query rules and relevance, ranking and sorting, and then the refiners that have now been added to the 2013 platform. So what are some of the search challenges? Well, if we just ignore SharePoint for a second and talk about some of the issues that we face, one of the first things that obviously over the past few years is that our data has become very much more complicated. It's different file types, different types of content, it could be images, it could be zip files, it could be videos, it could be text files, it could be a whole mix of things. But for me, the most important thing about our data is what we deem as relevant. Because what's relevant to me in the way that I search and the terms that I may type is very different, to example, for what Julia might search for. So I deem things to be more relevant to me versus things that she would as she performs a search in SharePoint. So we need to understand this importance of what is relevant. Then we also need to understand this purpose of the search, like we just talked about. Why am I performing that search? For example, if I type the word presentation, that could mean many different things. It could be that I'm looking for presentations. It could be that I'm trying to find information about presentations, or I could be looking for a PowerPoint file. So the single terms can actually mean many, many different things. And this is one of the big challenges, because when we go to one of the big search engines, for example, Google or Bing, and we type in the word presentation, you'll get in much information, many, many different types of information coming back that really could be useless. So this is an important challenge. And really that brings us down to the quality of the results. What is it that we're getting back? Are we just getting a whole bunch of stuff like a Google type search? Or are we now allowing what's called conversational narrowing versus relevance? Conversational narrowing would be I have the flexibility of being in the search interface and being able to kind of refine my information down instead of relying on a relevance algorithm which is predefined either by the product itself or by some custom kind of code that's been deployed that's performing a relevance based on the information that it thinks. So one of the big things right now would be this conversational narrowing. And of course, SharePoint 2013 allows us to do that by using the refiners, the different types of refiners, but we can also bundle the relevance together. So we can now do narrowing over the top of the relevance as we perform in those searches. So SharePoint 2013, they kind of made a few changes. In 2010, it was fairly okay. If you wanted something cool, then you went and put fast search in. And then, of course, when 2013 came out, they merged them all together. So now we have multiple components that comprise the 2013 search infrastructure. So crawl components, content components for analysis, analytics, covering everything from content to user interaction, the indexing processes to the querying mechanisms, all the way to the main administration. And some of these have good things, some of these have bad things. For me, for example, the administration pieces, there's a few things missing, but everything else means that we can scale far beyond what we used to have. We have a new user interface for search. If you've not seen it, then obviously we'll show you what it looks like. Relevance and ranking improvements. The way that if you were used to using fast search, then you will have seen some of these before, but the way that we can now modify the relevance, modify the ranking, create our own ranking mechanisms, allows us to really craft the results. The content analysis piece, now we can not only inspect the content, but also the user interaction to that content. So how many times was that content opened? Did somebody make a comment on that piece of content? Did they tag it in a status update that they posted in their My Site? All of these come together to build this analysis. Scopes that we used to have in 2010 and previous are now result sources, because realistically that's what they were. It's just a name change, but it also means we have better tooling to be able to create those result sources. Query rules we can use for results refinement. So as we start to look through relevance and ranking and sorting, we're going to look at query rules for actually refining the results. Often before the end user even performs a search, we will have predefined the results. We may have a result source that's going ahead and crawling content, I suppose segmenting the content from the content source and using query rules to define that one. And then of course one of the great new things for the crawl types is that they added this continuous crawl. We still have incremental and full, but because of the continuous crawl mechanism, we're now able to use search really as a powerful tool, often as a replacement for the content query web part that we all used to use. Content query web part would go on a web page, it would iterate through the data and present the results back. The downside being it was a live query with a little bit of caching, but now using continuous crawl and the new web parts, we're able to retrieve vast amounts of information quite quickly, and it's better performing. So the SharePoint 2013 search looks like this. So this is a screenshot of a test site that I have, and what we can see is we get the search box, which we're all used to seeing before. Then we have the refiners, and we have the basic refiners, which would be at the top. So where it says result type, there's base refiners, where I can just click. And this information is generated by an algorithm that looks at the results that come back from the search and then look for specific properties that are tied to that refiner and then presents those values that are there. So where it says newsfeed, post, and Word, that's because there's only one document that's come back and one newsfeed. But if there was a PDF that came back, if there was an Excel spreadsheet, then the values under the result type would show. Then we have what's called filter refiners. So similar approach again. This time it's the author. The author obviously looks at the author field of the content that's being returned and will list out the values. And you'll see that my name is there. And I can apply a filter at this point. So we're not actually changing the query that's being passed or returned. We're just filtering over the top of those values. Then, of course, we have what's called graphic refiners. Same kind of idea, except this time it's using a date field and gives us a slider to be able to change from one year to today or whatever else, the date scale that you'd like to use. The top section, you'll see where it says everything, people, conversations, and videos. These are referred to as search verticals. And that's the official type name that we use because they are verticals of the content that's being stored. Just like you would have marketing verticals or whatever else, or sales verticals, it's the same idea. So everything is going to be, as it says, all of the content, and then we narrow down based on the verticals that we create. And then, of course, we have the results that come back themselves. You'll notice that they're styled differently. They use item templates to be able to style, often based on the type of content that comes back. And notice we can also have activity and social feeds be presented directly into the search results. And of course, there's obviously other features that show up, which we're not going to talk about today, which would be the ability of when you hover over the piece of content or an activity, it presents the hover panel, and then will either, depending on your infrastructure, could show you what that document looks like by using the Office web apps, or it may show other information based on the hover panel configuration. So this is the base 2013 infrastructure. Now we'll talk about some of these pieces, obviously in regards to bringing back the right set of information. So first off, we'll talk about result sources. So to begin with, we create the content sources inside SharePoint. So the standard one is called local SharePoint sites, and that's the one that every single web application that you build, the URL gets added to that, and then it crawls and just crawls it into one big bucket. The result sources can be specified to a specific location for crawling. So you could say my result source is everything that you've crawled that matches a specific URL or location within the SharePoint infrastructure, or outside, because it could be Exchange, it could be Domino, Lotus Notes, it could be an NTFS file share, but a specific location that can be targeted. Result sources can live in 3 different locations within the SharePoint infrastructure. We can create them at the root level, which would be the search application itself, so the search service application. We can have them defined for use within a site collection only or a specific site. So this gives us some granularity in building a solution. Instead of us all building everything in the search application, we can often allow owners of the site collections or sites to define their own sections of content. I often use the analogy of a filing cabinet. So the filing cabinet is all of the content, so effectively the content source, and then the result sources are the drawers within that. And we can kind of build those out as we need to. There are 2 defined result sources that are there out of the box. One is the search results, which is just the equivalent of the everything, and then one is the people results. And those are the different types that we have. Now we can go ahead and build more if we need to. And of course we can use Query Transform. And Query Transform allows us to build and craft specific sets of data. So for example here, I've gone in and created a demo result source. I've given it a name and a description. The 4 options that are available to us, obviously it could be local SharePoint, it could be a remote SharePoint, it could be Exchange, it could be OpenSearch, or it could be something else depending on how we build that set of infrastructure. And then I'm going to choose what type of information to bring back from there. Is it going to be SharePoint results or is it going to be people results? And there's some logic behind this, which allows us to determine which one's which, because then it allows us to use different fields that come back and they're predefined in the search results. And then I go to the Query Transform, and this is where we get this new Launch Query Builder kind of process. This allows us to build queries specifically to the types of content that we want to bring back. So if you've used this previously in previous versions of SharePoint, so 2010 and 2007, it was never quite like this, but you had the ability to kind of filter out some information. In 2013, we get this ability. We get to build our own query from start to finish. So this is the basic one. So when I'm in a result source, I'm going to click on Query Transform, I'm going to click on the builder, and then it's going to present me with this screen here that allows me to put the search terms, and you'll see that search terms is in parentheses because those are the terms that have already been typed as part of that search process, and you wouldn't want to lose that unless for example, you were doing this process inside one of the search results or content search web parts, then you may not want to allow the regular search terms that have been typed to be passed in. So while I'm here, I can go into the sorting tab, and we'll come back to this in a bit, but you can see that we can sort by specific properties. I can assign ranking models. I can talk about dynamic ordering. But if I wanted to, I can go to a keyword filter, and the base keyword filter box allows me to choose the various options. So for example, the first option, which is the default, is query after all transformations, or query from the search box, or name of the user who runs the query, value of a parameter, or only return items or sites. So we can instantly narrow down the results that come back. So think of the kind of query that we're building. In parentheses, we get the first bit, which would be everything that comes back from the search terms. Then I'm going to add a keyword property. Let's say I choose only bring back lists and libraries. Then that will be appended to it. What I can then do is go to the property filter and say, well, I'm choosing the search term, I've got a keyword filter, and now I'd like to filter it even further. So we could, for example, pick file type and say it only needs to be PDFs or doc files or Excel spreadsheets or images, zip files, whatever it might be. But you'll notice that we also have Show All Managed Properties link at the bottom. This allows me to populate this drop-down with all of the managed properties that the SharePoint infrastructure has found. Now obviously things have changed a bit in 2013. In 2010 you would normally have to go and create these managed properties, but 2013 has the ability to generate these based on the crawl properties that it finds, or you could custom build those. So we have lots and lots and lots. So every single property that's crawled and found in the content is now available for us to filter with. So we'll come back to the exact query, but you'll see that I've chose only return lists and libraries, and I'll show you the query in a second. But then I've also picked something else, and I can then choose from the property filter what kind of query I'd like to build. Is it equal something? Does it contain? Does it start with? Is it less than? Does it not equal to? So once I've picked them, you'll see that I've picked the search terms. So the search terms, if you haven't seen it, that will be the K parameter that's being passed in the browser. I've then chose lists and libraries, and you'll see it says content class sts_list or content class equals something, and then I've chose file type, and I've entered a manual value of docx. So that's going to be a Word document. So now, if I think of the user experience, I could type in report as the search term that gets presented. It instantly filters out to items in lists and libraries that match, and then filters everything back out again by docx. And then we get a set of results that come back. And this is in the search results preview pane that appears on the right-hand side. So I can, in this control, I can see what results would come back. And obviously I have 3 documents that match, obviously very creatively named 1, 2, and 3. So what do we use the query rules for? So we obviously go and create the result source. We go through and we say, hey, I would like to filter all the content out, and then we create that result source. But query rules are a little bit different. Query rules allow us to conditionally rewrite the query that's coming in. So based on some parameter, for example, if it has the word documents, then we want to rewrite the query to include or exclude or do something with. We can conditionally federate to other sources at this point also. So instead of us having to create everything as one big bucket and then try and craft everything over, we can say, well, if this meets this criteria, then go and federate with Bing or something else and bring results back into that result set. And this is based on conditions and actions. So for example, we have query condition if the query starts with X, or the query contains X or something else. And then we have what's called context condition, and we'll talk about context condition a little bit later, but that's to do with search segmenting, or what's called user segmentation, which we can talk about a little bit later. So if the search segment, or if the search query that's being presented is coming from a specific place, or meets certain criteria of how it's retrieving the results, then do something with that information. So let's have a look at some of the types of queries, rules that we kind of have. So we have these conditions. The conditions can be phrase-based. So it can be an exact match at the beginning or at the end. It could be ad hoc, or it could be go and look at something from a term dictionary, or we could be doing a regex match. So we could be looking for some kind of condition at that point. Or we could be looking for an historical match. Is this query more likely aimed at Bob, or do most people click on this, whatever it's going to be? So we have this ability to craft these conditions that will determine what the actions are for the data that comes in. So what are the actions? Well, we can curate those actions using best bet. We can tell it that we want to show a promoted result. So we can say, for example, if the condition is it contains the word report at the beginning or at the end, then promote specific types of content to the top or to a specific location based on that value. Or we can completely reformulate the query on the fly. We can say, for example, if it contains the word report or document, then instead of what it was doing, add or show a block of results which have a different query type, or replace the core results with a completely different one. So we can say, I type the word docs, I actually want the query to be documents, and then it will return the results based on the query rule that we defined at that point. So how do you create one? Well, we can go into SharePoint itself, and you can do this from the SharePoint service application, the search one, or you can do it from the site collection itself. And we can go in and build this query. And how do we do this? Well, we select the result source that we want to apply. So the way this works, the result source fires, the query rule gets called when the result source gets ran at that point. So first off, we're going to define the query conditions. So once we've chosen the content source, we're going to come in and remember those options we've got. Query matches keyword, query contains this term, query matches this value, query comes from a more common source, advanced query text match. And we can go through each one. So if I do exact keyword match, then it's going to ask me for specific keywords, semicolon out, so we can obviously run multiple sets of things at that point. It could be a specific action. So for example, I like the way that it shows it here. It says action terms or our commands like download or video. And once we put those in, then we can have this query rule be called every time the result source is called. We can go all the way through and say query matches dictionary exactly, and we can map it to a dictionary set of information which comes from the term store. So you can build a term store value set and have it say, well, if it matches all of that, then do this. It could say, well, if we type something in a word, it could be more common to come from the conversations. And so at this point, we're doing a replacement of the values and saying, well, instead of going and getting the items from the original query, go ahead and get something from conversations instead. Or we could do commonly typed, or we could do complete advanced query text matches. And you can see how we can build these, match regular expressions, contains these, entire matches, start matches, assign match to this, to that, to that. Very, very powerful how we can go ahead and build this. Now, once we've crafted those queries, then the actions that we have are add a promoted result or add a result block. So if we take the promoted result, I can go in and say, well, this is the result that I would like to have shown every single time. So I can go through and pick an item, the URL of the item, whatever it might be, and have that promoted at the top. Or I could do a result block. A result block would be, well, go and get me a new set of information. And you'll notice that we get the query builder. So I can say, well, the block title is results for these terms. This is the query that comes in. This is the source that we'd like to change. And you can go through the build. We can also then decide whether you want to show the more links, or we can override the results. We can change the ranking. We can tell it what display template to use. So think of that process. You as the person come to the site, you type in a word, but in the background we've crafted it so that when you type a specific phrase, it goes and does something very specific. It styles it differently and presents a different set of results that are more meaningful to the business. Because if we left SharePoint search as it is, it would just work just like a normal Google type search, where it just brings everything back that you type. But if I'm looking for something specific based on a word, I can then define the results that come back. We can also then route to content search web parts. I'm not going to focus too much on this one, but we can define a label, and this will then target a content search web part to update the results for that in the same context. So what about this idea of context? And I said we'd talk about this a little bit later. The context is you have different sources, different categories, and then we have what's called user segment. So if we just flick through, if we do a source, then obviously this allows us to say, well, if I'm performing this kind of query in this context of a source. So based on wiki or pictures or pages, I could import from the term store if I wanted to for the second option. But if I wanted to do user segment, and this is quite important, so user segment can be used in lots and lots of different ways. So for example, let's say you had user profile properties that were stored against the user. You could come into here and say, well, if the current user has a specific profile property, then refine the results automatically based on that individual user. One of the examples that we've kind of used before is based on browser type. So for example, if you're using Internet Explorer 10, or you're using 11 or 8 or Chrome, you can potentially do a user agent match and then bring back different results based on the type of browser. So now we've got query rules. We've defined our result sources. We've put the query rules in place so that things run in the background. What about ranking and sorting? Well, to begin with, there's general purpose ranking. We have people-specific ranking. Then there's what's called special purpose ranking. And then all of those three can be influenced by query rules, search schema, and custom ranking models. So we have the ability to create those rules to basically define the ranking and the sorting. The search schema we can update and extend in the search service application to say, well, these are the fields and this is the rank. And we can also create custom ranking models. And we can take an existing one, create our own. There's actually some great documentation on MSDN about how they work. It's very complicated, some of the documentation, but how you can build those and deploy those into a SharePoint environment. And then, of course, we have everything, videos and conversations and people. They all use the default ranking. There's nothing special. It's the exact same ranking for everything that's there. And so when we're building a SharePoint environment, we should be having those conversations of, well, how do we want to rank the content that's there? So how do we rank? Well, in the last screen, we went to the web part itself. We went to the content source, and we clicked the launch builder. And in the builder, we can click on the sorting option. Now, the ranking mechanism doesn't show up unless you've selected rank as the sort by. And then we're allowed to see all the options that are here. So as we said, the default search model is the one that's used by most. But then we have other options that we can use. So these are ones that I would recommend that you tested. So for example, if you were using a people search, then you may want to come in and look at these different ones where, people search by social distance or by expertise ranking, or people search name social distance or name ranking. So you can see different approaches that can be used to bring back the information that you need. So how does the ranking process work? Well, I'm going to perform a query in SharePoint, and I'm going to type my name. The first step is that the properties get queried at that point. So let's have a look at the properties. We're going to have title, sales, weekly, type, doc, activity, 1,000 clicks, author, Liam, rating, 5. And you'll see the highlighted colors that I put in there. So I did a search for Liam Cleary. Let's say I did a search for Liam Cleary DocX, or Liam Cleary Weekly, or Liam Weekly, or something like that. These are the properties that get inspected as part of that process. So we pass it in, and the phrase in the query is effectively the K that's from the search box, and it validates against this. So in this instance, we're going to look at it's going to look at all the properties, and then it's going to start figuring out, and it will then do any transformations that take place. So this could be a query rule that's ran. It could be some custom ranking model that's ran, but all of these processes run together. So I type in a value, it validates the properties, it performs the transformations, and then a rank score is generated at that point. Once the rank score is generated, then that's how it appears in the results. And so, of course, you've got activity. Everybody often thinks that the higher it goes in the search is based on how many times it's been clicked. But it's not just that. It's based on all of the properties being mapped against the query that was presented in the first place. So sorting, we have what's called query request sorting. So this is sorting based on the query that's passed into the actual process itself. We then also have rank sorting. Rank sorting is you're going to select rank, and then you're going to choose the ranking, and the ranking is going to change the sorting mechanism. We then have what's called managed property sorting, which is where we can define the managed property and the ordering of those results that come back. Then we have formula expression sorting, and I've pasted a link in here so you can use that, the formula expression sorting. And then we actually have a legitimate one called random sorting. And it's actually quite intriguing because it really does. It just randomizes the results. I don't know why you would need to use that, but it is an option that's available to actually random sort the results that come back. So how does this work? Well, in the search results, I get to sort by, and the sort by box, as you can tell, has all of the properties. Obviously, the first option is rank, but underneath that is all of the properties that we've selected at this point. If I choose author, then I get the ability to then do an ascending or descending, and then by. So I can build the list of these going down. I can say, well, sort by this, and then sort by this, and then sort by this. If I wanted to do dynamic ordering, then I could actually go in and choose dynamic ordering, having chosen rank, and then go through various options and saying, well, the title contains or matches the URL, the content type is, and then you'll notice that in the drop-down, I can then promote. I can then promote to this, promote to this. You notice there's a series of numbers. So promote to top, that obviously makes more sense, and then the various numbers will determine what kind of content gets moved and where that gets moved to within the results. So how does promotion and demotion work? Well, first off, promotion to the top, this places any result at the top of the results. Any result. If we do promotion of 10, this will move a mediocre result to the top of the results. Demotion to the bottom, that self-explanatory, places any results at the bottom. And obviously, when I mean any result, I'm talking specific things that match that criteria, not just anything. And then promotion of 10 places a mediocre relevant result under the most relevant results. So you can see that based on the numbers that we supply as part of the promotion and demotion, that it moves up and down. So once we have all this figured out, we have the result source, we have the content source, the result source, the query rules, everything built in. Then we look at the refiners. And as we showed you before, the core search site has these built into the user interface. Result types, authors, modified dates, regular ones, filtering ones, and graphical ones. Then we have the refiner web part itself. Now, in the user interface for the regular search, it does use the refiner web part, but that's a specific web part that's there. And then we have the search and content source web part that allows us to do refinement into the search query itself. So if I go to the refiners, you'll see here that I can go into the search configuration, and based on the refiner option, I can then determine. So for example, we've got file type, content class, type ID, author, last modified. And at the bottom, we're able to define what type of, or what name, what type it is, how we sort, the sort direction, what's the maximum values, things like that. You'll see that we have two values, multi-value and a refinement value. The refinement value lists them out as regular text. The multi-value one lets you check the boxes and filter back out again. Now, if I'm inside a web part, so for example, the search results web part or the core or the content search web part, we get the refiners tab that allows me to say, well, this is my query, how I've filtered it, and now I want to refine it even further. And I can simply add those values, and my values will then be refined based on that. So how does the search flow work, and how should you look at it? Well, first off, we have content sources, we have result sources, we then also have query rules, We then have rank and sort, and we have refiners, and then we have the actual results that come back at this point. This is the flow of search, and as you're building a SharePoint environment and you're building your search configuration, this is the flow that we should be looking at. We should be building content sources for the higher buckets of content. We should be then building result sources to represent those drawers in the filing cabinet, so to speak. And then the query rules are going to be the dividers inside the filing cabinet. And then the ranking and the sorting is going to be the ability to order within those compartments. And then the refiners allows me to look over the top and say, well, I've gone all the way down. I've gone from SharePoint, all SharePoint content, to site-specific, to transform results that are federated, to a custom ranking model, so I get the ones that I need, and then I want to refine, and then I get the results. And then, of course, we can style and add all those bits and pieces. So these are the 6 blocks that we really should be focusing on, starting from top to bottom. Now, some final search thoughts. Search quality is great in SharePoint 2013. We've got improved ranking, improved linguistics, and most importantly, we need to identify hubs of data. Look at the content. Look at what is a hub of data in its own right. When we look at the team sites you're building, the site collections that you're building, the public sites, your exchange content, everything, would they represent a hub in its own right? And if they do, then it's a content source. And then you segment further down. Manage intent diversity. And what we mean by this is like I started off. When I type a specific word in SharePoint, it means something to me. It may mean something very different to somebody else who may type that same keyword. So use the query rules as an understanding to say, well, when Liam from the technical team does the search for presentation, he doesn't really want to see anything from human resources because that's not what he's looking for. So let's craft the results that come back for him to be technical content only. But when somebody from the marketing team goes in, let's craft the results to bring back presentations that are marketing specific. So remember, we built the query rules. We can look at the words. We can say, well, when so-and-so does this, because we know where they come from, which is based on their user segmentation, we can then define the content that comes back. And for me, there's great tools for management. Manage the relevance using the admin UI. Everything that we saw, the screenshots, it's all from inside the SharePoint UI. And that for me is a great thing because it means we don't need anything extra. We don't need extra tools. We can just go straight into the SharePoint interface. So we'll open it for questions at that point.
Okay, great. So we do have a couple questions. First, are there any third-party tools that help with optimizing search?
Yes, there are some tools for third-party optimization. There's a few. If we're looking at tools just for optimizing it, so making tweaks to it, then there are a few little tools that are available out on Codeplex and other ones. But if you're looking for a tool to really kind of blow everything away as far as that, then you have products like Concept Searching that can kind of take the regular search and, for me personally, take it to the next level. So going through and crawling through your content and building some of these things that we talked about, the whole query rules and the result sources, doing all of that for you. So there's a few out there, but for me, that would kind of be the one that I would recommend.
Great, thanks. We have another question. What if you sort by rank and then by a managed property? Does sorting by the managed property affect the rank number?
That's a good question. As soon as you change and start sorting and filtering by something else other than the rank, then yes, the rank is then changed because the query that's being presented back is actually different in the first place. So ranking only just runs over the top of the result set that comes back. So if you decide to order and sort and filter, whatever else it might be, then yes, your ranking model does then change.
And how is the refiners section of the query builder different than just adding filters? Does choosing refiners in the query builder place the refiners on the page somewhere?
No. When you go into the web part itself and you add a refiner at that point, effectively what you're doing is you're restricting the results that are coming back over and above a query rule. So remember that the web part gives you the flexibility, and we've actually seen this in live client environments where when you're building the query in the first tab, you don't always get the results back often that you're looking for. But when you remove that query and decide to filter by a refiner in the web part, it brings the results back. And so that flexibility just allows you to refine it before the end user comes in and starts using the refiners on the web page itself.
Okay, great. And those are all the questions we have for today. I'm sorry we went a little bit over the top of the hour. Again, the recording of this webinar will be placed on our website at sharepoint.protiviti.com/archived webinars. Thank you all for joining us today. Thanks, Liam, and everyone have a great day.